10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Welcome to the City Council meeting of November 3rd, 2022. City Clerk, preamble, please.
This meeting is compliant with the Ralph M. Brown Act as amended by California Assembly Bill number 361, effective September 16, 2021, providing for a public health emergency exception to the standard teleconference rules required by the Brown Act. The purpose of this is to provide a safe environment for the public, staff, and council members while allowing for public participation. The public may address the council using exclusively remote public comment options. The council members of the public may view the City Council meeting by logging into the Zoom webinar listed below. City Council meetings can also be viewed live and on demand via the city's YouTube channel, youtube.com/brisbaneca.org, or on Comcast channel 27. Archived videos can be replayed on the city's website, brisbaneca.org/meetings. The City Council meeting will be an exclusively virtual meeting. Agenda materials may be viewed online at brisbaneca.org at least 24 hours prior to a special meeting and at least 72 hours prior to a regular meeting. Meeting participants are encouraged to submit public comments in writing in advance of the meeting. Aside from commenting while in the Zoom webinar, following email and text line will also be monitored during the meeting, and public comments received will be noted for the record during oral communications 1 and 2 or during an item. Email ipadilla@brisbaneca.org, text 628-219-2922. Join the Zoom webinar with the ID 991-9362-8666. The passcode is 123456, and the call-in number is 1-669-900-9128. If you need special assistance to participate in this meeting, please contact the City Clerk at 415-508-2113. Notification in advance of the meeting will enable the city to make reasonable arrangements to ensure accessibility to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, City Clerk. The meeting's called to order at 7:34 p.m. Would you please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Clerk, could we have a roll call, please?
Member Cunningham,
I'm here.
Councilmember Davis,
Here.
Councilmember Lentz,
Here.
Councilmember O'Connell,
Here.
and Mayor Mackin.
Here. First item we have is a report out of closed session. City Attorney, could we have a report out first on the closed session meeting of October the 20th? That was regarding employee performance evaluation.
Madam Mayor, that'll be done by the city manager, the hosting.
I'm sorry, go ahead, City Manager.
Yep, it's quite okay. Council met with the city manager. A review was done and direction was provided.
Thank you. And City Attorney, could we have a report out of the closed session meeting of October 25th and also October 26th?
Yes, on October 26th, the council met in special closed session to discuss the city employment matter involving the city manager. There was no action taken in the meeting, and staff was simply given direction on follow-up. Earlier this evening, the council met and heard reports on 2 claims that were recommended to be denied by the insurance company. The council agreed on both claims to deny them with unanimous votes after hearing the presentation of the facts. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, City Attorney. Moving on to adoption of the agenda. Can I get a first and second to adopt the agenda as it stands?
So moved.
And a
Second.
No.
Okay, a motion by Davis, second by Cunningham. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Cunningham,
Aye.
Councilmember Davis,
Aye.
Councilmember Lentz,
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell,
Aye.
and Mayor Mackin.
Aye. Moving on to awards and presentations. This evening, we have a proclamation designating November 2022 as Native American Heritage Month. I'll read that proclamation. Whereas Native American Heritage Month is celebrated each year in November to commemorate the history and culture of America's indigenous people. In Brisbane, we recall the original inhabitants of our land, a tribe of Native Americans called the Ohlone. Whereas the mountain and shoreline provided abundant wildlife, shellfish, acorns, seeds, berries, the Ohlone thrived for several thousand years by careful management of the land. And in their culture, they worship nature gods, including the sun, the eagle, the hummingbird, and especially the coyote, who they believe had created the world. Whereas the Ohlone were forced from their land into missions, forbidden to maintain their language and traditions, but Ohlone descendants continued to live throughout the Bay Area, spirit unbroken and actively celebrating their culture. Whereas in celebrating the traditions, culture, and accomplishments of Native Americans, we must also acknowledge our country's history of colonialism, discrimination, and genocide inflicted upon our indigenous people. Whereas we recognize the 2021 appointment of Deb Haaland as Secretary of the Interior to be a historic moment, as she is the first Native American to serve as a cabinet secretary. We hope it marks a turning point in mending the relationship between the U.S. government and Native American nations. Now, therefore, as mayor of the city of Brisbane, I hereby declare November 2022 as Native American Heritage Month. And in tribute to the heritage of the Ohlone, let us also learn to be wise and respectful stewards of this land. Thank you. Moving on to oral communications number 1. Do we have a member of the public wishing to make a comment? This would be for any item that's not on tonight's agenda.
Madam Mayor, I believe we have, the hand is no longer raised. So I have not received any written correspondence, Madam Mayor, and I see no hands raised.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving to the consent calendar. Can I get a first and second to approve consent calendar item B? There's only one item tonight.
Moved.
So moved.
Okay, that's a motion by O'Connell. Lentz, was that a second?
That'll be a second.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Cunningham,
Aye.
Councilmember Davis,
Aye.
Member Lent,
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell,
Aye.
Mayor Mackin.
Aye. Moving on to new business. Item on our agenda tonight is authorizing the city manager to execute a temporary lease of city-owned parking spaces with ample battery. Could we have a staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. Ample is a California-based company with a facility in Brisbane. His business model is to accelerate transition to electric mobility by offering a modular and quickly deployable EV battery swap system. The proponent is here tonight. He'll describe their technology and their proposal in more detail. They've been working on developing their technology. They have a couple of installations in the Bay Area and are proposing to lease a couple sites in Brisbane on city-owned property, looking at leasing approximately 1,700 square feet of parking, city-owned parking lot in Brisbane Marina, and about 900 square feet near the former B of A building at 70 Old County Road. The lease term would be 2 years maximum. At these two locations, Ample would deploy up to 5 EV battery swap stations. They will be responsible for any improvements required to implement their proposal and install their facilities. Each facility would require 2 parking stalls, so 2 spaces per swap station. And then they would also be deployed, rapidly deployable. It takes about 1 to 2 weeks to install these facilities. Proposal was reviewed earlier this year in August by the Economic Development Subcommittee, which recommended it be forwarded to the City Council for its consideration. There's an attached agreement to the staff report, which has been reviewed and approved by both City Legal Counsel and the Public Works Director, who's responsible for managing the city-owned property. As I noted, it would involve up to 6 parking spaces at Sierra Point. This would not adversely impact the availability of public parking at the marina. Also important to know that the city has initiated a public master plan process for both Sierra Point and will initiate a similar effort for the B of A site. The term of the agreement of 2 years will not adversely affect the ability of the city to implement those proposals, finish those planning processes, and actually it would not impact future redevelopment activities the city might choose to undertake in the future. Again, in the fiscal impact, this per the lease, Ample will pay the city $800 per month per station, or a total of $96,000 over the 2-year lease term if they do the 5 installations as requested. Staff's recommending the City Council authorize the city manager to execute the attached lease agreement, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
Questions for staff? Anyone? Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you. Looking at the lease agreement, there's a couple discrepancies that I think the term of the lease in shows, trying to find where it was here. Terms of use of property. It says maintain up to 3 electrical vehicle stations at $800 each. But your staff report says 5 stations. And so that's an inconsistency in the lease agreement. And then the type of fencing is not noted or photographed on the, it's not in the photos given to us, what their fencing may or may not look like.
In regard to the number, yes, that should be corrected. I understand it's going to be up to 5, 3 at Sierra Point and up to 2 at the B of A site. So the agreement would have to be amended accordingly, or the agreement would be modified. And then the fencing would be subject to review by the city engineer as part of the improvements to the property. If any fencing is to be installed, I don't know that it's been decided yet if any fencing will be installed. You may want to hear from the applicant about that need.
Okay, it's just that I know that when the fencing went in at the B of A site, it created more tension in the city and on with the public than you can imagine a 3-foot plastic fence could ever have. So I would imagine that this might raise the same kind of concerns if there's no delineation of what that fencing may look like. So, but I'll reserve my comments for later on the application.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cunningham, questions?
I actually have a question for the applicant, but I would rather hear from the applicant first. Hi, Eric.
Let's
And then
hold off.
save,
Yeah.
and hold that off.
Yeah, let's
thank you.
hold off on applicant questions.
That's the
Councilmember
only question I have.
Lentz?
I don't have any questions for staff at this time.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Davis.
I don't have any questions at this time either.
Okay, I have one question. Is the use permitted in this area?
Again, the city's zoning regulations do not apply to city-owned property. The city's authorized to use its property as the council chooses. We didn't identify any significant land use incompatibility with this temporary use, though, in these parking areas.
Okay, and in terms of the lease agreement per number of stations versus, I guess you would call it a monthly rental payment, was that ever discussed between the parties?
Could you rephrase the question?
Okay, let me try it a different way. So the way the lease is structured is according to the number of stations, there's a fixed fee per month. Was it ever discussed that since there are 2 locations that allow up to 6 stations, but is starting out at 5, was it ever discussed having a fixed rental rate for each location rather than it being based upon number of stations?
Now, my understanding was always proposed as that based on the number of stations, that they may have a right to go up to a certain number, but if they chose not to implement the full number, they wouldn't need as much city property, and they would not then pay a lease on property, obviously, if they're not utilizing from the city.
Okay. And let me see if there's anything else. I think that's all I have at this time. Are we moving on to, I see Mr. Sorensen is here from Ample. Thank you for joining us tonight. Do you have a presentation for us?
Yeah, I do have thank you for having me, Mayor Mackin and the council. I do have a few slides. I was advised maybe a couple minutes. We went into pretty, I think, deep detail with the Economic Development Subcommittee, and I thought I'd give a very brief overview of Ample, our system, give some photos so people can get an idea of what it looks like on the ground, and then happy to answer any questions. So, okay. Everyone see that?
Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
So thank you for having me this evening. Ample, as John mentioned, Ample is a California business engaged in building electric vehicle infrastructure. We have a novel technology that is a battery swapping system that you can think of as kind of an alternative to charging, building out EV chargers. We currently have a manufacturing facility in Crocker Industrial Park in Brisbane, and where we currently employ, I'm not sure the current head count, but last I checked, it was over 20 people. And we have plans to scale up our manufacturing in Brisbane, and we have also collaborated with the city on applying for a grant, multi-million-dollar grant from the CEC to scale up zero emissions transportation manufacturing in Brisbane. So we're a business operating in Brisbane. We appreciate the city. We want to continue working and saw some opportunities to deploy some of our EV swapping stations in a couple of Brisbane city-owned properties. Ample system, like I said, is a bit of an alternative to what we generally think of as the EV infrastructure, which is plugging in your car and waiting for it to charge. We have this system, which is a battery swap system, and it's centered around our EV battery swap stations, which you see a photo of here. We launched to the public in about 18 months ago, and since then have been recognized by Fast Company, Time, featured in Forbes, CNBC, as one of the most exciting new technologies and innovative companies working kind of in the green economy. We're partnered with a variety of large companies, including Uber. We have strategic investors around the world. And really our focus is to accelerate the transition to electric transportation. And the way we do that is by creating a solution for EV drivers that's as fast, cheap, and convenient as a gas station. You see the EV Ample station here, which takes up roughly the space of 2 parking spots. It goes flat on top of pavement, doesn't require a lot of civil work, and can be deployed in 1 to 2 weeks. And so we have negotiated or been talking with the city about 2-year leases, which is in pretty stark contrast what you typically see with EV charging companies that require 5 or 10-year leases to recoup a lot of fixed costs that they have to put in each site. Very briefly, our battery swap system consists of 4 main systems. Subsystems. First is the modular batteries, which we are currently building in Brisbane at our manufacturing facility. Just want to make clear that we're not building battery cells. We're not taking raw materials and turning them into batteries. We're taking cells, like you can think of, the cylindrical cells, which are slightly larger than maybe like a C battery. We're packaging them in novel ways and then deploying them in EV electric vehicles around the Bay Area. There's a plate component that goes on the vehicle, and then kind of the station infrastructure is an autonomous robotic system, and then like kind of in station charging that happens on site. So because of that, we're working with PG&E to bring in power to each of these 2 locations to be able to deploy our infrastructure. I want to talk real briefly about the plan and what we're proposing in Brisbane. We've identified these 2 sites along with the city that will work for this. The first being at the marina, and the second being at the BOA building or the land adjacent to the Brisbane Village Center. At the marina, what we seek to do is do deployments that have minimal impact and are minimally disruptive. So we identified existing infrastructure. There's existing transformer at that site. And then we've been working with both the city as well as PG&E to figure out a plan to bring more power to the location. And what we're proposing is to lease roughly 75 linear feet for 3 stations, kind of on the outermost line of stalls at the, I don't know if you would call that the middle parking lots at the Brisbane Marina. And so this will require minimal trenching, but some trenching. Much of it we hope to do in the softscape to minimize tearing up any existing parking lot. And I'm happy to answer questions about this. Let me just go through to try to keep it under 5 minutes here. And then at the Brisbane Village Center, again, there's an existing transformer. We are working with PG&E to create a plan to bring power to a panel and switchgear that you see in kind of the blue, the light blue there. And then we would deploy two stations kind of in the parking lot. Not in the main parking lot, but in a parking lot that currently seems to be used kind of as flex parking for the shopping center. And there may be some transient vehicles there currently. In the photo here is maybe a crude visual approximation, but you can kind of see an idea of the size and scale of the stations and what it might look like in this part of the property. That's very briefly who we are and what we'd like to do at these 2 locations, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sorensen. I know I have a lot of questions, but let's give everyone else a chance. Councilmember Cunningham, go ahead.
Thanks. So I just want to get some clarification. When we were given the presentation, Eric, at the Economic Development Subcommittee, you had made it very clear, as you did in your original written materials to us, that these stations for now were just for fleet vehicles. Is that still correct?
That's still correct. We've launched our business model focused on fleets. And you can think of Uber drivers was our initial launch partner. We're working to integrate, for example, last mile delivery companies, and many types of fleets that ply their ways around the Bay Area and up and down Brisbane. But yes, currently it's for fleet vehicles of all kinds, and eventually we will open it up as kind of a consumer product that any consumer of electric vehicles would be able to use.
Okay, and I see that you have moved the location of the two stations in the parking lot, which was of concern to me. So thank you for doing that. Is there anywhere else on that site that they could possibly be if council doesn't like where you've moved them to?
This was at the request of the city engineer, so that because the main parking lot is gated off and they didn't want to open it up and invite other people to park there. We'd be happy to talk with the city about having another location on that property. I think this location makes a lot of sense and is maybe the least impactful. You could imagine it potentially being in the kind of slanted parking stalls on the other side of the building, but that may impede in some of the way the traffic can go.
Right, and my final question is, I believe my question to you back then was, you're going to put down a concrete pad, and that's about the only permanent sort of infrastructure that would be in place. And my concern back then to you, and I think Councilmember Lentz's concern at the same time was, what if we start this whole development idea for that site and you're there, how long is it going to take to dismantle it? And I forget your answer to that.
Yeah, so it takes us 1 to 2 weeks to deploy the station, and it takes us less than a week to take it down. We kind of disassemble it. It comes in subsystems that are kind of just put together on site. We can quickly take it down and move it off site. Given some advance notice. And I think we'd settled on 2 years as an appropriate lease term because it seemed like no shovels were gonna be put in the ground at that site within 2 years, we don't anticipate. And that's an appropriate amount of time for us to recoup some of the costs that we're putting in that we wouldn't be able to take with us, such as pouring concrete pad.
And I think you said that, the hope was that this was going to grow significantly in that period of time where you would want a bigger space for more of these stations in 2 years or so, correct?
That's right.
Okay. I've clarified my head. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Davis?
Are we moving on to discussion? I don't have any questions.
Okay, we're on questions still. Councilmember Len?
So, Eric, thank you for the presentation.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you moved the location at 70 County Road. If we were to move forward with the battery swapping, that seems to be a better site than out in front. In the questions that council had for staff, Councilmember O'Connell mentioned the fencing, and none of your photos and none of the discussion that we had talked about fencing, that these stations were, in a sense, self-contained. They open up, they have, for business, and then they close down, and that's all that is required in regards to security. Can you, add something to that?
Yes, thank you for noting the fencing question. We, at some of our locations, historically, we have put fencing. We don't anticipate putting any fencing around any of these stations. We often use temporary fencing while we deploy, because you can think like once everything's kind of put together, it's secure, but as you're assembling things over the course of multiple days, things may be a little bit easier to walk off with. And so our preference would be that we would be able to put some temporary chain link fencing around for 1 to 2 weeks while we assemble the stations, and then take that away. And that's a conversation we can have if that's going to be an issue. It sounds like there's historically been some issues with fencing at these sites. So it can be open to discussion.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, that makes sense. Having temporary fencing while you construct the stations. Yeah, we have some plastic fencing that divides the village. So and that not exactly the most attractive, but yeah. So Councilmember Cunningham talked about the fleet use, right? That this isn't really, kind of like a gas station where anybody just shows up, gets fuel, and then they take off. In order to do the battery swapping, the car has to use your batteries, correct? So you can't have, right? You can't have like your own Uber or whatever and then show up at your place because they're not the same battery.
Yeah. You have to be an Ample customer, which involves having an Ample system installed on the vehicle. Now we're working with fleets right now. We will move like from business to business to business to consumer, B2C, and we're working with automakers so that you can imagine that when you want to buy your next vehicle, you go and you choose the color and the trim level, and part of what you choose is, do I want a swappable battery or a fixed battery that we typically think of as electric vehicles. So we're working with automakers to bring that type of choice to the consumer. Right now we're working with fleets who obviously purchase hundreds or thousands of vehicles at once. But you would not be able to drive a current Tesla off the street into one of these stations to get your battery swapped. The vehicle has to have our plate, and then which allows any model of vehicle to use the same common battery and infrastructure.
Okay, and so they need the same plate because the automated swapping, right? They it's gonna unscrew the plate, put the new battery in, and then screw the plate back on. Yeah.
So the plate itself stays on the car. I don't know how in the weeds we want to get, but yeah, the battery modules are dropped out by the robots, stored in the station, and the automated robots deliver fully charged batteries in it. So the concept is to slowly charge these batteries outside of the vehicles, which reduces the stress on the grid and is kind of better for the energy system overall and better for the health of the batteries. And then when a car needs to be recharged, you kind of physically move the energy by moving the batteries. That's the idea. And it's a much more efficient, from an energy perspective, it's a much more efficient way to get electrons into batteries that are in cars than to try to charge the cars very quickly.
Got it. Okay. And then the last question, there will be no employees at any of these stations. Everything is fully automated. Robots do all the work. But we know that machines break down.
Right.
If there are issues, I guess your tech people that are located in Brisbane would just come out and fix the
That's right. Yeah. Ample's business is essentially selling electric miles. So if one of our stations is down, that's a loss of, a revenue center for us. So we have every incentive to operate and maintain these systems. We don't sell our infrastructure, we build and maintain and operate it. So, when a station goes down for whatever reason, we will quickly dispatch field techs there who will get it back up and running. But you are correct that there's no on-site operator all of the time. We have remote operators. The stations have cameras, sometimes, for security and off hours, but really so that we can operate the stations remotely from a remote operations center.
All right, great. All right, thank you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you. A couple questions. The original manufacturer's battery stays intact in these vehicles, and then your plate is an add-on, basically battery cradle?
No, that's not the case. The vehicles do not have the original, the OEM batteries, we call it, the fixed battery. Those are replaced by our battery swapping system in the vehicle.
And do your partner manufacturers approve this, or does that void their warranties?
Yeah, we're working with all the major manufacturers to offer this, and it's offered under the current warranty. So, you have a warranty for the vehicle you buy. Behind the scenes, what happens is all the suppliers provide a kind of a sub warranty under that. So if something happens to, a component of the vehicle, the actual supplier of that is responsible. And it's the same with our system. We're working so that, so if there was an issue with the Ample system, Ample covers that under the existing kind of umbrella warrant. That works. Some of our vehicles were purchased used, in which case we're kind of repurposing vehicles that were nearing the end of their useful life, and giving them kind of new batteries, more range, and I think delaying the trip to the landfill.
Okay. And as being only for fleet or people who are subscribers to your system, the signage is not going to be necessarily advertising signage, or what kind of signage do you envision for this site?
Yeah, we follow all local ordinances on wayfinding signage. So yes, this wouldn't be a big billboard or anything. It would be, a sign that's appropriately sized, just saying, the battery swap stations are this way, something, and keep it within the limits that the city sets.
Okay, because they're fairly restrictive in this area. And
yeah, so our all of our customers also have like an Ample app, which has an interactive map. So drivers, they'll be able to route themselves exactly to the coordinates of each station. So I think we don't need to guide drivers that have no idea where they're going.
okay. And so how in the facility itself for each swap station, how many batteries do you have on hand to swap? What's your assumption of traffic in it?
So when a depleted battery gets removed from a vehicle and put in the station, it immediately starts charging. After several hours, those battery modules are then ready to be put back in another vehicle. So the station itself holds anywhere between 8 and 12 vehicles worth of batteries, but that doesn't mean it only can serve that many vehicles per day, for example, because it's kind of constantly recharging the batteries that are in the system. So unless there's extremely high demand for any one station, every driver gets a fully charged battery swap, and the batteries are kind of charged gradually within the station. Our expectations upon initial launch is maybe roughly around 15 to 20 swaps per day per station. So that's 50 to 20 vehicles per day per station, to give you an idea about expected traffic.
And the robotic, and did people make an appointment to come in, or they just pull on in?
There is a feature to reserve, but that's not necessary. We're really seeking to kind of replicate the kind of mental paradigm of not having to worry about where you're going to charge your car, which seems kind of to come when you drive an EV, and instead replicate the paradigm of just going to a gas station when you need a refill and just looking up where the nearest gas station. So we're really building out a network of these. So, Brisbane is kind of one node in the network that we're building out across the Bay Area. So the demand for our services is kind of divided over, a number of stations. It's not like every driver is going to be coming to one of the two sites. And so we don't anticipate long lines. That's a bad user experience. We're incentivized as a company to make sure that never happens. And from our own experience running our network and building it over the last 18 months, we've seen that we don't see long queues of vehicles waiting to swap their batteries, because it only takes 5 or 10 minutes to do a battery swap. You can get the cars in really fast. Whereas if you're at a charging station, for example, you might have a car there for 30, 60, or 90 minutes, and you start having significant queuing problems.
So besides the actual station, you would anticipate having no parked vehicles outside, no queues?
Yeah, I would say our anticipation would be to have no more than one vehicle queuing while one vehicle was swapping. But our goal is to have, essentially it ready for a swap anytime a customer arrives. And on our app that I mentioned, it can show if there's currently a swap happening or if the station is free.
Okay, and do the vehicle drivers stay in the vehicle while the swap is happening?
That's optional. Drivers can get out or stay in their vehicle. Typically, we see our drivers, sometimes want to stay in the vehicle, sometimes want to get out and stretch their leg, because often they're driving all day.
Okay. And then maybe this is a question for staff. The proposed meter location, that would be on city-owned property, not on the leased property?
That's correct, as shown.
Okay. And so would there be there's no liability for having that meter location on city property?
I might defer to the city attorney. The liability is addressed in the agreement. The liability runs with the project sponsor.
And just to be clear, that's utility infrastructure. So that's infrastructure that kind of we're bringing and working with PG&E to install. But that's utility infrastructure that we don't own. That's just being brought in as new service for our use, and would stay with the property after we leave.
But typically a meter would be on your own property, not on city property.
That's up to the city. We haven't discussed.
But typical for a project in the city, the meter location is on their own property, not on public space.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. See if I have any other questions. I think that is my only question for the applicant. I have some other things to bring up in discussion.
Okay. Councilmember Davis, I cannot remember, did I ask you for questions?
Twice.
I'm Mr. Sorensen, and you were holding off, or did you want to ask some?
No,
questions?
I don't have any.
Okay, all right. I couldn't remember. I'm deeply engrossed in my own
It's okay.
questions here. Thank you for your patience. Okay, Mr. Sorensen, a couple odd questions all over the map. So the stations themselves look very self-contained, no requirement for additional buildings, auxiliary buildings, or containers on site. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. And you launched your first swap stations in 2021, early 2021. What's your track record been? What can you provide as information regarding safety to the residents of Brisbane, including potential exposure to hazardous materials?
Yeah, so we don't believe there's any, there should not be any concerns about exposure to hazardous materials, any more so than having any EV parked on the streets in Brisbane. Our batteries are in fact safer than a typical, for example, Chevy Bolt battery. Every Chevy Bolt battery is on recall for potential battery fires right now. We have broken the batteries down so that our battery modules are smaller and we have much more insight and vision into what's going on inside our battery modules than a typical EV does. So if there's ever any issue with a battery in the station or in a vehicle, we get an alert immediately. We can dispatch people to take a look at what's going on. We've never experienced any safety incidents in 18 months of operation with drivers. I mean, we've been operating more than 2 years internally on public roads without any safety incidents. And as I said, we're not building batteries; we're assembling battery modules. So we believe that this is very different than manufacturing raw materials into battery cells. We're taking essentially cells that are certified for transport in air, land, and sea, and we're putting them together in novel ways in order to be able to swap them across vehicles.
Okay. And why 2 locations? Why did you not approach this as, here's a great location near Bayshore, or here's the marina, there's a lot of space? Why 2 locations?
We're seeking to build out our network of stations across the Bay Area, as dense as possible. And in discussing locations with the city, the marina site came up. We originally had kind of noticed the Bank of America site and had approached about that. And the marina site, especially the fact that it already had existing infrastructure that was underutilized, looked very interesting to us. And it looked like it wouldn't be disruptive to what's going on down there. And so for us, we're excited to have multiple locations in Brisbane for redundancy, as well as just to increase the density of the network.
Okay. And typically, what are the hours of operation of these stations?
Right now, typically the hours of operation are 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
So if someone arrived at the station at midnight and needed a battery swap, the station will not operate?
We are moving to increase our hours. Like I said, we don't have operators on site, which allows us to increase the hours because there's not a 1-to-1 ratio of having to have a person on site at every station. So we're exploring extending the hours into later and earlier and off-peak hours. But our stations also on the app are shown whether they're open or closed. And our drivers, currently our customers are professional drivers and they're well aware of the hours of operation.
And will you have any security at these stations for the nighttime hours?
Some sites, we do have security that comes by periodically. That's not something that we've discussed in detail internally at these Brisbane sites. I think we have less concern at these sites than we do, for example, in Soma in San Francisco. But certainly, if there was a concern, a security concern, we would definitely hire security for those locations.
Okay.
We don't want
my
anyone
final
spotting
question.
or defacing the station.
Right. Okay. And my final question, in our report from Ample, you state it will support electrification of local business transport and delivery vehicles. When you say delivery vehicles, could you describe to me the size of these vehicles?
Yeah, so we're working to integrate up to class 3 vehicles, which you can think of as like kind of your largest kind of Ford Transit or Mercedes Sprinter vans that we often see, the Amazon Prime vans, for example. So anything before you get to a real box truck or something, significantly larger than like a passenger vehicle. So though our system that we're deploying currently supports vehicles up to those kind of common delivery van size vehicles. There's not many of them on the road yet, but over the next 2 years, I think we'll see an explosion of last mile delivery electric vehicles. And we're in preliminary discussions with many different companies, including some in Brisbane that operate in Brisbane, about testing our technology and adopting our battery swappable delivery vehicles.
And if you, in fact, have increased subscriptions from fleets that are using those larger vehicles, do you designate certain sites only for charging of those? My concern here is the shopping center being some tight turning radiuses and certain commute hours where there's more congestion versus the marina, which is more off the beaten path, but certainly has a lot more surrounding free space.
We haven't yet, but certainly if that was a concern of the cities, and if it presented problems with residents trying to access the shopping center, we certainly could designate some off limits. I don't think we typically don't want to open up all infrastructure to all vehicles in the system, but if there was a reason why a certain size of vehicle wouldn't fit at a certain site, then that's something we certainly could make off limits to that fleet. And I agree that the marina.
Okay, I think I would just suggest.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I would just suggest to you that you do some spot checking lunch hours and afternoons, at least at that Bank of America site. So you see what you're contending with, because some vehicles might use that driveway by the bank as an entrance or exit, but oftentimes they'll cut through the shopping center as well. And that can be congested. So I think you want to also be aware of what you got going on there.
Point taken. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Those are all my questions. Did anyone else think of questions as we were going along that you'd like to ask?
I have questions for staff, but I think that's part of the discussion.
Okay. Before we go on, do we have any members of the public wishing to make comments?
Madam Mayor, Cliff had his hand raised.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't see that. Councilmember Lynn, go ahead.
That's okay. Yeah, I'm with Terry. My questions now are for staff, and they might include Eric. So before we have discussion, that'd be great.
Okay. So first, do we have any comment from the public?
Madam Mayor, I see a raised hand, but before that, I did want to note for the record that council received correspondence from Dana Dilworth. And we have a raised hand from Michelle Salmon.
Okay, Michelle, go ahead.
Thank you. I do have some questions. Can a vehicle with an ample battery charge at a regular charging station? Or are they locked into your system where they can only charge at an ample system and can't charge at a standard charging system? And then what is Ample doing to support renewable energy in terms of solar generation, et cetera, or will they just plug into PG&E and suck their energy out? And I think that there will be queues in Crocker Park as more and more regulations impact fleet vehicles about having to be EV vehicles. But by the way, I'm basically in favor of this because this is the way we're going and people are going to need to have places to charge vehicles. So I'm not opposed to it, but I really want to make sure we have all our bases covered. Because one of the things I think about is, oh, these are nice little tents and people will drive in and get their battery changed, etc. But where are the drivers gonna go to the bathroom? Where are the restrooms? Where are the garbage cans that they're going to dump their garbage in? Where are they going to get a snack? What are they going to do with their litter? This happens. I mean, Terry O'Connell, Council O'Connell, and I picked up during one coastal cleanup day somewhere around 40 or 50 plastic bags of pee out at where you first get off the freeway at Lagoon Way and Sierra Point Parkway, and tons, several 50-gallon buckets of garbage that truckers had stopped and dumped their pee, or somebody had stopped and dumped their pee bags and dumped their garbage. That's a reality. If you're a trucker, you have to pee and etc. And you have garbage that piles up in your truck because you're doing a lot of driving around. And I don't see any facilities there for these drivers to be able to do that. So are we going to be creating both a waste problem and a litter problem? And how are we going to address that in both of these locations? I am already sick and tired of the amount of garbage I see, and I don't want to create more garbage. And I think that the provider of the service should also be providing facilities or making accommodations for the reality of life of a truck driver or a service vehicle, a fleet vehicle, like what you're talking about. So I think that really, really needs to be addressed on a practical level. By the way, generally, I'm in favor of this, but I want us to address these issues and make sure that we don't create a despicable situation with bad behavior or necessary behavior on the part of the drivers. So thank you so much. And I'm excited about this, but let's take care of business, real business.
Eric, did you want to respond to those couple different points? And I made notes if there's any you didn't get.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the question. Let me start with the restroom and the trash. We've been operating 11. We've deployed 11 stations across the Bay Area. We've been operating them for over a year and a half. We have seen that it's helpful to provide locations to use a restroom. Some of our sites, we have portable restrooms. Some of them are adjacent to a building that has a real bathroom and toilet. We do provide trash services at some of our sites. In discussions with the city, it seemed like it was not desired to have a porta potty adjacent to these, and at all of our sites we don't have portable toilets. Only at some of them. We haven't seen a trash buildup problem with our customers, but yes, they do need to use the restroom. And many of our locations do have those facilities. We weren't planning on putting those fees because it's on city-owned property. That's something we can revisit if necessary. Part of our job is to make sure that this is a good experience for our customers. So we go to great lengths to make sure that our sites are regularly cleaned, that there's not a trash buildup, and that's something we can be extra focused on for these sites. Renewable energy. When possible, we source 100% renewable energy at all of our locations. That will be possible at these locations because Peninsula Clean Energy, the local community choice aggregator, has an option where you can pay a slight premium and procure 100% renewable energy. So that's something that we're committed to do whenever possible. In terms of on-site generation of renewable energy, it's just not that practical for the footprint of our station. It just won't generate that much energy. It's not worth it for us due to the amount of power and energy we consume, but we are procuring 100% renewable energy. And then finally, from an engineering standpoint, our vehicles can charge. They're not allowed to charge at at the fastest charging, what's called level 3. If you're familiar, there's level 1, which is basically your household outlet. Level 2, which is effectively like a dryer outlet, a 240 outlet, and then level 3, which is kind of the Tesla superchargers and EV Go stations that you see that have very fast speeds. Our vehicles with our batteries are able to charge at level 1 or level 2, but not level 3 because that rapidly degrades the battery and that impacts the economic model that we're working on. Part of the benefit of our system is that we're kind of slowly charging the batteries. So we're able to squeeze many more useful miles out of these batteries because we're not charging them quickly and we're avoiding battery degradation that way. So we don't allow fast charging, but we do. You can charge level 1 and level 2. Those were the questions that I had written down. If there's anything I didn't address, I'm happy.
Okay, Ingrid, one more pass. Any other members of the public?
I see another raised hand from Michelle Salmon, Madam Mayor.
Michelle, can we make it quick so we can
Yes,
go back?
he answered his questions, most of the questions I have, but I'm still concerned about restrooms because that is a cost of doing business that will be put on the burden of other local businesses that do not get any remuneration from the AMPL. And I think that really needs to be addressed by the city before the permitting is done, even if it's a city restroom, such as the ones at the community park. This is a problem. The other day I was in Morgan Hill waiting to catch the train at 6 a.m. and there was nowhere to go to the bathroom. And I just waited till I was able to get on the train. But it's an issue and it will be an issue at the charging stations and it needs to be addressed. So thank you so much, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Noted. Back to the council. We have some staff questions. Who'd like to start? Councilmember Davis?
I don't have any staff questions.
Okay, Councilmember Lenz?
Well, I think Terry was ready to go. She was before me.
Okay, Councilmember O'Connell?
So has staff looked at, since we would, I'm looking at the lease agreement and it doesn't have any hours of operation that I can see. And it does not have, I brought up earlier that the 3 electrical vehicle battery swapping stations, and that really is 5. And I've never heard of a lease where we lease them the property and give them if you use all of it, you pay for all of it. If you don't use all of it, you don't pay for all of it. And give them a 2-year lease on maybe you'll use 2 of them, maybe you'll use 3, maybe you'll use 5. I would say that the lease should be for the site, for what we've agreed, because if they've got a lease, we can't lease it to anybody else if there were other willing takers. And so that the lease shouldn't be open-ended to the applicants or the lessors, leasees benefit. It should be closed into the city of Brisbane's benefit. And I don't know, I assume this was looked at by legal, but it just doesn't seem right to me that we're giving them an option of how many spaces they're actually leasing or not leasing. And I do think that the trash and cleanup, I think there's some very ambiguous language in the lease about the state that they need to keep it in or how often they need to maintain the area around their stations. And we need to make sure that there is enforceable regulations as to what happens if things aren't right there, because we ran into a problem with another lease or permit that we issued that the contract was much too ambiguous to be enforceable. And I would certainly want hours of operation and a tighter lease contract than what I see here.
there anything else?
I think that's it for now.
Councilmember Lentz, so did you have,
Yeah, I have questions, not comments. So, so John, and I didn't see it in the lease, and I apologize if I missed it. And it's something that a member of the public raised. So, and that's in regards to the 100% renewable energy. So, can we put it in the lease agreement that the energy that will be used to charge these batteries will be 100% renewable?
I would defer to the city attorney, but that sounds reasonable to me, given that it's available through
I mean,
programs.
because it's on city,
Brisbane, yeah.
right? It's on city property. We as a city have chosen to do 100% renewable through PCA, so PCE, excuse me.
It's,
city attorney?
it's perfectly legal. What I was actually going to suggest later, if you act to approve this, I was going to ask for conditional approval. This is not a lease I had seen. It was reviewed by Associate Counsel. And I have my own questions, but I think they can be resolved. So that could be taken up with those. But I do think there's some detail missing. I suspect because there are ways out of this lease rather quickly, and I suspect that's why it's as flexible as it is, or as general as it is. Regardless, I would request that the council, if they do act to approve it, they do not approve the lease in its current form. They let the city attorney approve it after a full review.
Okay, great. So it sounds like then that can be part of a condition of approval.
Yeah, what I would do, yes, it can be legally. I would talk to the company through staff, and if they can't meet it, then have a discussion with them, bring it back to the council or have another discussion. So when I say subject to city attorney approval of the form of lease, I simply mean as to the basic terms and strengthening them. But on something like that, Councilmember Lentz, we put it in, and if they can't do it, we bring it back.
Okay, great. And then, we've seen these still pictures, and I don't recall, maybe it's just my memory, I'm getting older, but I don't recall seeing a video of how the operation works. So, just by seeing pictures, you don't hear sound, and you're not seeing the lights. And so, this location on 70 County Road is, is the entryway to our town. So it has to look good, right? And they can't, sound, awful either. And I'm assuming that there's probably minimal sound, but I don't know that. So, John, did you get a video of other locations and how the operation works?
I did not get a video or audio, but there was discussion with Ample about noise levels, and he can probably, if you're willing to listen to his testimony on that, refer to him as to its sound characteristic.
No, I appreciate that, Eric.
Yeah, it's not a loud system. There's robotics moving, so you hear some robots kind of moving to and fro. But there's no exceedingly loud noises. We've recently done some testing of decibel levels because there are concerns that since people are going to be inside the system while the car's swapping, potentially. It can't be too loud. And I don't have at my fingertips the results of those. I know that we don't have any concerns, but I can't tell you exactly how many decibels right now it gets at its loudest point from when standing outside the station, but that's something I can provide follow up.
Okay. All right. So so you showed the pictures of the 3 locations, but they're not in operation yet?
They are. All 3 of those are live and have been for over a year. I believe we did show a video at the Economic Development Subcommittee, but it did not have sound. So that's probably why it's not sticking in your memory. But I'm not prepared to show a video with sound here tonight. I don't have one at my fingertips, but that's something that we can do in a follow-up.
Okay. All right. And then, there was the issue about, and since now we're talking with you, Eric, and I guess also with staff. Well, I mean, we do have 2 public restrooms, one at the park, and then there are public restrooms at the marina. And so John, I guess, have we partnered with any private company and recommended using our public facilities such as our restrooms before?
Not that I'm aware of, obviously.
Yeah.
It's a public facility. It's open to the public. And of course, any patron of any business in Brisbane theoretically can use those facilities. So I don't know that there's a need to have a formal agreement
No.
the use of public facilities if it's as long as the business operations align with the hours of the restroom being available.
Okay. All right. And then just one last question for you, Eric. So like when the Uber driver comes to the facility, is he gonna like press some kind of, or is he gonna like type in a code like from his phone and then the door opens up, he drives in or she drives in? Is that how it works, and then closes when they leave?
Yeah, that's right. They initiate the swap via the app. And so it drives, like any car that drives in there, it won't try to swap it. There's kind of a digital handshake between the vehicle and the station, and that's initiated via the app.
Okay, so then with those type of capabilities, then you could have a 24/7 type operation.
That's right. Yes.
Okay, and is that something that you would hope to see happen at these facilities, that people can use the battery swapping stations when it's convenient for them?
Yeah, I think our goal is to have some of our stations in our network be available 24 hours. I don't think all of them. I don't think it's appropriate, nor will there be a demand for all of them. I think if we were to, do longer hours at one of these sites, it would. Our preference would be to have it be the marina, because drivers driving, later into the night or earlier in the morning are probably driving to and from the airport, and that's closer to the airport and more convenient. Ultimately, some of our stations, I couldn't say if we would want either of these to be ultimately available 24 hours. We currently don't have any stations that are available 24 hours.
Okay, all right. And since I know there is some minor infrastructure costs that go into these things. It takes a week. I'm sure, you like you said, you're trying to recoup your costs. That's why you want the 2-year lease. I'm just going to throw this out there to you. If we say started with the marina instead of both sites, so that, because, there's no like real trial run in this thing, out the marina, you're right, it's more isolated. There's not a lot going on at this time. There is activity, though, more so, I think, with the village site. Cars do use that area for overflow parking. Is that something you might consider? Like, okay, yeah, let's start with the marina and see how those stations work, and then come back a few months later and do that, or do you feel like you have to do the whole thing?
Yeah, our preference is definitely to seek an agreement for both sites. But if that's something that the city's currently not comfortable with and we want to do a trial run, then we could consider doing kind of a staggered deployment and do the marina first. But our preference is to seek an agreement for both.
Okay, thank you. That's it, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so Terry, I see a hand up but we also have not had Councilmember
Real
Cunningham.
quick
Do you-
question. It's
Okay.
hard
Yep.
for me to understand on the map at what spot in the marina the location is. Is that next to dock 3? This is for staff, I think. John, you're on mute.
Well, it's at the south end of the easterly parking lot, so near the hotel site. That road parking at the south end of that parking field. I don't know which dock that corresponds to, but it's.
Is that by the parcel T, the big park hump?
Yes, yes. the south
Okay, that would be near dock 3. Okay, thank you. That was my question. Thank you.
Okay, and Councilmember Davis?
This is a question for Eric. What percentage of the vehicles that access your charging sites, do you have an estimate on what percentage of them have backup beepers? Or is it just traditional like Uber vehicles, or are you looking at like fleets like Amazon?
Yeah, right now, I'm off mute. Right now, all the vehicles that are using our system are light duty vehicles. They're passenger vehicles. I don't believe any of them have backup signals.
Councilmember Cunningham?
I don't have any more questions, but I have a bunch of comments.
Okay,
Are we-
so
Are we
last,
ready to go there?
last go around, Councilmember O'Connell, you still have a hand up. Is that from previously? Yes, okay. Any other final questions of staff or Mr. Sorensen? Looks like no, going once, twice. All right. Council discussion. Let's start.
I see another, Madam Mayor, I see another raised hand from Michelle Salmon.
Michelle, do we really have to, again? If I give you 1 minute.
Yes, you didn't close the public hearing.
Go
I do
ahead.
think it's important to specify the hours of operation, especially as they go forward with larger vehicles that might have backup beepers that wake you up in the middle of the early morning. And I also think that you really need to have the lease buttoned up because we already made a mess out of the Google lease. We don't need to do it again. So please make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed before we go forward, and not make a burden on local businesses that have to service restrooms for drivers, but make accommodation for that, because realistically, how many of those drivers are going to walk to the park to use the restrooms, and are they even open at 6 or 5 in the morning? I don't know. So I think you really need to set some parameters here. And same thing with the marina restrooms. And we need to take into account the added cost and water and facility use for the city of Brisbane. Thank you.
Okay. So I actually have one question for John before we go into discussion that I didn't get a chance to ask. The lease agreement that we were given in the staff report talks about month-to-month holdover. It makes no mention of the potential for reopening a new agreement or the base rent being raised. Why do we just have it as a month-to-month holdover with the same terms, or is that open for discussion?
Well, certainly all the terms are open for discussion. This was something that was discussed between legal counsel and the applicant. But certainly that's why it's in front of the council. You want to modify the terms, that's at your discretion.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so before we go into discussion, I've made some notes. So I'm going to just revisit for all of us a couple things that have been asked. One was the contract hours of operation needs to be clear. Second one, specific language outlining enforceable regulations regarding trash and cleanup and noise. Another item for the contract was an agreement that energy must be 100% renewable. And let's see what else. Something having to do with restrooms, whatever we end up deciding how to deal with that. And then finally, the terms for any renewal or month-to-month agreement And also, Terry, you had brought up actually the lease, at least the draft that we saw, having variables on the number of stations as opposed to a lease agreement for a site or 2 sites. So those were the items I have on notes. Discussion. Who would like to start? Okay, Councilmember Cunningham, you
Madison could go
were
first.
faster on the draw. It was a close. Okay,
Oh, thank you. I'll try to be succinct. I'm very familiar with Ample. I've had discussions with them previously. I'm really excited that they're choosing to put down roots in Brisbane. I think this is such a cool opportunity for us as a city to help amplify businesses that are making headway in the green space. And how lucky are we that we can help aid them in that, which could have far-reaching benefits for our area and our planet. I do believe that there was a public comment that we had received from Dana Dilworth, and she described concern over earmarking this site for this use. And Eric mentioned it briefly, but I think it's worth noting that there are no plans, no long-term plans for the Bank of America site just yet. So while the city is determining what to do long-term, I think it's a good use of the site to have it, be utilized in some shape or form, the Bank of America site. And I think that it benefits the city, it benefits Ample, and it in turn benefits our region as a whole. So I don't want any of the members of the public to be mistaken that this is now going to be the only use for this site going forward. I'm in favor of both sites, the Marina and Bank of America. I totally get the comments around trash. Trash is a really interesting thing. Seems like something that would be easy to address. It isn't. I've been studying the trash on visitation quite regularly. It seems that all of the trash cans that are in front of, let's say, Julie's or Midtown, people pull up, they empty everything out of their car, the trash cans overflow. When someone sees a full trash can, people want to put more trash in a full trash can. I have had discussions with South San Francisco Scavenger and Recology about this phenomena. Recology in the city, they would put a trash can out and it would just attract immense amounts of trash. They would take the trash cans out on San Francisco street corners and the trash would disappear. When there's no place to put it, it doesn't accumulate. They just find a different place to put it. So I don't know that having a trash can here is going to invite what we want to see. I think instead we put it on the app, we put it on Ample to make sure that the place is clean. And however they see to it to have that happen is on them, and we have regular checks. But then we have to get trash service out there. I think that if we just put in there that we expect it to be clean and that we will audit it occasionally, and whether there's a fine or there's there's sort of ramifications for it not being clean is more appropriate way to go. I think unfortunately people will end up using the bathrooms at the Village. I also think that people who are accustomed to using this model understand that what it's like. It's not a gas station. When you go to a gas station, you assume there's going to be a bathroom there. If you're already an Ample customer, you know what to expect. You know you're not going there and that there's going to be a facility there for you to use. If you're a user, you already understand that. So going off of what they've already indicated, it doesn't sound that this has been a big issue at their other sites before. So I'm not as concerned about that. I think that, if there are issues that arise, then we address them. But I am good to move forward. I do think that they should be paying for all of the slots, even if they don't use them. That's on them. I think that
the price that we've determined, I think, is fair and generous. And if we're willing to allow them to be on the site, they should just pay for the whole thing. And I am in favor of doing some parameters around usage. So around, maybe like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or something of that nature.
Okay, Councilmember Cunningham?
Okay, so I think one of the reasons that I got a little excited about the presentation early on when it was to the subcommittee was the fact that, we have money we're paying out on the Bank of America site that we're not recouping in any way. And I thought because we've got a short-term lease here, that this would be a great way for us to pay for our bank note. And this would cover our bank note by having them there. I think the short-term lease is in place because I believe, and if Eric, are you still there? And if Eric thinks I'm wrong in saying this, I think they're hoping to be looking for bigger places to be, not at the Bank of America side. Moving forward, this is more of a test case for their business model. I think we can make it quite clear that there are bathrooms across the street. If we've got it in our lease that we've got hours that they could be there, that we could have the bathrooms open. I don't see people when I go to get my car washed using the bathroom at the place I get my car washed all the time. People don't go there to pee, and if they need to, they can run across the street. I think we could have a little sign that says bathrooms just across there. It's not like this is going to be a long-term, big, permanent situation. And likewise out at the marina. I think this does play really well into the future of our sustainability, almost right next door to the carbon sequestration place. We are moving in the right direction. We've been moving in the right direction for a long time. We've had LEED certified, we've got LEED certified buildings. We've got every award in sustainability you can imagine. We are way ahead of the curve on our reach codes for everywhere else. So I think this is a good marriage between where we're headed and, the future of what's next for electric vehicles. I'm 100% in favor of it and hope we can move forward quickly.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Councilmember Lentz?
All right. Yeah, when I first heard of their operation, yeah, I know I was really excited because I thought that regular users, of electric vehicles could use their charging stations. It still doesn't mean that I'm not excited about it. I mean, these technologies take time. Their current users are basically going to be Uber drivers, right, or these delivery trucks. So they're not really benefiting our community, so to speak. But I think overall for the planet, in coming up with alternative ways to move electric vehicle use forward is a positive. So I am in favor of moving forward with Ample, though I would like to see them start in the marina first, and say after 3 months everything is working fine, exactly like how they say, then I would be inclined to then allow the operation to happen at the site of the former B of A location. I do hope though that we can move forward with the B of A site sooner than later. The interest that we do pay on that loan will not be covered by the rent money that we would, or lease money that we would get from Ample, but at least it does provide some money, in the interim. So, so that's where I'm at with this.
Okay. Councilmember O'Connell?
Thank you. I I'm in favor of this type of organization, this kind of business and this kind of business model. I think it is very niche driven. It's not going to benefit all of our residents, but that's, part of the big picture that we need to look at. I don't have a problem with it being for both areas as long as we have a good, tight lease. And we know what kind of light pollution we're doing, what kind of hours, what kind of enforcement we have. And so I certainly would not approve this lease as it's written. I think that we should get our legal involved in getting a better lease that puts restrictions and is ironclad on what our abilities to control the situation are. I do think that we need to know what the decibel level is of this, and that makes a big difference. I don't think it's really a good idea to say, oh, we'll throw it out at the marina because there's less people there. That's a tranquil, remote space for the most part. And while it isn't necessarily with all the construction that's going on there during the daytime, at this point, this is going to be much closer to where the marina, the docks are located, and tranquility on a boat is one of the fabulous things about being out there. So I would want to make sure that we have decibel limits and that we look at what the overall ambient noise is going to be from this operation. When they talk about not having backup beepers because there are Uber cars, I mean, my sister's RAV4 has a backup beeper that makes my dog bark when she goes to back out of her parking place. So they have a high-pitched whine on many regular old, passenger vehicles. So I think we need to look at what the ambient noise is coming from this before we enter into a lease agreement. But I am in favor of moving ahead with the negotiations and the in theory process. Also, I'd want to know how much lighting they're going to want for security at night and what kind of lighting, because again, with the last temporary use permit that we issued, we again had problems with lighting and that turned into an issue, lighting and traffic. So I think this lease needs to be really looked at much closer, but in theory and in practice, I'm for moving forward with a good enforceable lease, but I'd like to see that before we move forward.
Councilmember Davis, you have a hand up again?
I'll be quick because I know you haven't spoken yet. I think there's also the thing to consider that there was a comment made that the local businesses are going to have to step in, to provide bathrooms to accommodate the people coming onto the site. But I do also think that this could be beneficial to the businesses at the village as well. People are coming, they might have to wait around for a little bit. They may want to go grab a coffee or a donut or, a sandwich at Subway. So I could see this benefiting our village shopping center to some degree.
Okay, thank you. All right. Many things I concur with all of my colleagues here. I would say, first of all, I agree. I would rather go ahead with both sites. This is a limited agreement as it is, so I don't have a problem with that. And I would also point out that the B of A site, they're only occupying a tiny corner of it in the back, not the rest of the site. So it's a marginal piece of that actual location. As far as the fees, I would rather see one fee for each site rather than it being based upon number of stations. I agree with the logic that if you are operating a business, you don't pay for how much square footage you're using. You pay for the site monthly. I think that based on some past experience we've had with permits, this is kind of going into uncharted territory. I would like to see something written into the lease for a review after 60 days of operation. So that if we find, both of us, whether the residents and the city finds there's problems, or if Ample finds there's problems, we have that mechanism already written in to discuss it and negotiate what needs to be done to remedy any unforeseen problems. I would like some specific guidelines for keeping the site clean so that expectations are clear. I think stating the hours of operation is very important. We may need different hours at the Old County Drive site as opposed to the marina. But I think certainly we need hours, specific hours, so that we both understand what is allowed. If hours are extended, we need it written into the lease that they must come back to the city for permission to change any hours of operation. I think also it would be beneficial to the council to have something brought back to us again about light pollution, noise pollution, decibels, and security lighting. And I think that could be brought back to the council with a new proposed agreement. I also think, just based on what we're hearing, vehicle size, I'm not comfortable with the vehicle size being so vague. What if in a year there's a new size delivery vehicle being used by XYZ delivery company and it's much larger than we expected? Is that going to be appropriate maneuvering in and out of the Bank of America site? Maybe not. So I think we need to also specify limitations on vehicle size or limitations on which site can handle what vehicle sizes. And that's all I have. So we've now heard from each one of us. I think one of the biggest issues we need to resolve amongst us is, are we going forward with both sites? And in terms of the lease agreement for the monthly fee, is it based on stations or is it based on a fee for each site as a flat fee? So I would ask to hear from each one of you one at a time, starting Councilmember O'Connell on those two items.
I'm sorry, I would say that the lease should be based on the site that they're proposing to lease, not on how many units they deploy. It should be one flat fee per site. I mean, for each location, the B of A location and the marina location. They should be a flight.
And
Yes, and your other question that you wanted agreement on?
Are you in favor of moving forward with both sites?
Yes, I don't have a problem with both sites as long as the decibel level, the noise is not going to be intrusive. And I think that the intrusive noise could be more pronounced out at the marina site than it is at the other site, at the B of A site, especially if it's only during regular daytime business hours. I think that it'll be more noticeable out at the marina. But again, I don't know what decibel level the whole transaction takes. And I'm not sure if the city has the ability or the police with their decibel level gun to go to one of their sites that's currently operating and actually find out what an in-use operation reads.
Maybe we can get our police to go with a video camera, even on your phone, and also measure decibel levels simultaneously, so we could see how it operates and where and how much noise is generated by the different operations.
You know,
of-
sometimes the rolling up the door is going to be the loudest, most obnoxious noise.
Right,
Who
that's
knows
why
what it really
I
is?
suggest a video with decibel meter, right? So we have
Right.
an idea of what the full range is. Okay,
I think it's really important. And, you know, all of our locations in Brisbane are very sound sensitive.
Mhm.
And if we bring something in that's adding a clanging noise every time the door opens, and it's 40 times a day, that will be annoying to members of the public that are annoyed by noises and the security lights. So there's a lot of issues that we need to look at. And so I think that I'm not going to say, yay, I'm voting for it until we get a real contract that really addresses all these issues that we've talked about.
okay. Councilmember Cunningham?
I think everybody's made it pretty clear. I think at least 4 of us are okay with looking at both of the sites and the noise concerns. Eric, just so you know, noise in Brisbane is almost the #1 enemy. It's the strangest things because of the nature of our city, the bowl and all kinds of different things, but people are very noise sensitive, just so you know. So, you know, addressing that will behoove you for a long time. So I think, you know, if all of these issues are addressed, we look at the lease, the lease gets fixed. I'm sure John knows exactly what we're talking about at this point. I don't have anything else to add. I mean, it just needs to be cleaned up. That's it. The lease is a bit sloppy.
Okay,
And you're right. Leasing the site, not the spaces. I absolutely agree with you all on that.
okay. Councilmember
you.
Lynn?
Okay, so addressing the 2 issues that you raised, Madam Mayor. So, you know, there appears to be a lot of concerns from the council, you know, whether light or sound, and no lack of respect, Terry, in regards to the marina. I mean, you know, as opposed to Old County. You know, I mean, I'm in favor of both locations, but I'd like to see the marina start the operation first. And Eric has said he's okay with doing that. Maybe it's less than 3 months. Come up with, you know, a time frame for us to kind of see how the operation works, and then if that is appropriate for us, you know, then put it in the village location. In regards to the lease, so we have 2 stations at Old County, and we got 3 stations at the marina. So they can't be the same, right? Because there's 2 in one and 3 in another. So to me, the stations make sense. But we can say, you know, okay, if you want to do this operation, there's a minimum of $4,000 a month. Eric, you know, his company might, you know, really take off during these 2 years and want to expand that operation. Obviously not at Old County Road because there's only so much space, but there's a lot more space out at the marina. And then then you'd have something in place where you could expand, you know, the operation because and have a fee structure in place, you know, so that, you know, having that, you know, having an understanding of what the costs are allows for him to work out the, you know, the cost of expansion if that is something that he would want to do and something that we would want to do based upon the track record of using our property for this use. So, but hey, if you all want to like just move forward with both locations, I'm okay with that too. Though I think it's prudent to take a staggered approach. Also because the applicant says he's okay with it. So I think that's okay for us.
Okay, Councilmember Davis?
Well, I've heard why Terry doesn't want to start with the marina, but I haven't heard a compelling argument as to why you want to start with the marina or why you don't want to start with B of A.
The reason being is that out at the marina, we have just a sea of isolated parking. Now, granted, the location, I guess, is somewhat close to boaters, some of the boaters. But to me, the parking lot out at the marina is isolated. Whereas the B of A site is the entryway to our town. And so, we're going to be moving forward with, having a new vision for that site. Granted, yes, one day we'll have a new vision for out at Sierra Point, but that just seems longer down the line. And so I just want to, something that goes in the entryway of our town, I want to make sure that we do it right. So that's my concern. Doesn't mean that I'm not in favor of, but if we can see an example out at Sierra Point first, prior to, at the B of A side, I would prefer that.
Okay, Councilmember Davis, you had the floor, so to speak. Did you want to finish? And yes, Councilmember Cunningham, I see your hand, but Councilmember Davis, it was her turn as such. Did you have more?
Yeah, I'm good with both sites. I think we would say if we're going to charge based on the site and not on the spaces, you would want to say what the maximum allowable square footage to use would be. Not to exceed, 3 overall charging stations at the marina and 2 at B of A, and you could stagger the rental prices to reflect if you wanted to. You could charge at the marina like $2,400 a month, and you could charge at B of A $1,600 a month to reflect that one site can accommodate one more charging station. So, I'm good with both sites, and I'm good with charging a flat rate. But if there's, if we want to take into consideration the amount of charging stations per site, then we could adjust the rent to reflect that.
Okay, Councilmember Cunningham, back to you.
This is directed back to you, Councilmember Lentz. You're the one who has been really on all of us to make some money to help pay for the loan we have at the Bank of America building. And now you seem to be backpedaling. And if anybody has told anybody in our community that we're going to have something built at the Bank of America building within 2 years, then that's misinformation that's going out into our community. It is not going to happen. We are not going to have anything at that site. And for me, we get to pay the bills with that money. So I'm all for it. And that was something you were so concerned about. So I'm not sure about the backpedal, but if people are being told that we will have something at that Bank of America site within 2 years, they're being misinformed.
To be quite honest with you, Councilmember Cunningham, I'm not exactly sure where you're going with your comments, but yeah, I'm not even going to comment on it because I just think it's kind of bizarre. So.
Okay, so I have my comments here. I'm in favor of starting with both sides. I don't see a downside to doing that. I think if there's going to be problems, there's going to be problems. But I think part of this is getting a good lease agreement and dealing with the concerns that have been voiced by all of the council, the public, and that's decibel levels. Let's have a video showing the noise, being prepared for light pollution, security lighting, traffic, vehicle sizes, all the guidelines, everything that we talked about. And perhaps some thought again put into if there should be different parameters for each location in terms of, again, the fee for the site. If things go famously out at the marina and they want more space, let them come back and say, we would like to lease more space, separate agreement. We don't have to base it on stations. They might want more space to park a couple cars because it's so popular that they're blocking traffic and they need a little staging area. So I would be in favor of just saying it's a fee. You're leasing the property, not by stations. So I think we have enough information here. I would suggest Mr. Sorensen to maybe also get as much information as you can, bring back to us, showing more of other stations, lighting, security lighting, anything that we've mentioned here that would be helpful for the council going forward to reassure the public that we're addressing all potential concerns. So, John, does that sound reasonable? Do you have an idea what we're looking for? And also city attorney.
Yes, I'll work with Tom and we'll work on those requirements and come back.
Okay, and city attorney, any comments? Just, you've heard this whole protracted discussion and you indicated you had some other items within the lease that you wanted to address.
Yeah, just form language, but the, I have the list. John and I will work together on it and we'll, hopefully Apple will want to stay in the community.
Okay, thank you. So we are not authorizing the city manager to execute a temporary lease tonight. We're asking for the information to come back to the council at another date.
Quick question. When does staff think that they will have this back to us?
We'll have to work with the applicant in terms of getting someone out to other sites. I don't think we're going to be able to be back in 2 weeks. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, staff, for the report. And we move on to staff reports. The city manager's report on upcoming activities. City manager, your report, please.
First item tonight, the vote centers are where you can pick up replacement ballots, drop off your ballot, register to vote, and cast your vote in person. Remember to vote at City of Brisbane Vote Center, City Hall, 50 Park Place. It's open from November 5th to 7th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. On November 8th, the election day, 8 a.m. 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. You can still register to vote at smcvote.org or at any vote center. Second item is the invitation to join Sustainable San Mateo County's 2022 Indicators Report launch event. This will be at November 10th at 10 to 3 p.m. at the Genentech South San Francisco campus. Building electrification in San Mateo County will be highlighted. The Brisbane annual Veterans Day flag raising will take place next Friday, November 11th at 9 a.m. in the Community Park Gazebo. Our former council member and veteran, Clark Conway, will be presiding. If you can't make it in person, the event will be streamed on the city's Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Brisbane 94005. And finally, Brisbane Stands United Against Hate. The United Against Hate Week is November 13 to 19. Local nonprofit Lyrical Opposition will be hosting a poetry slam on November 14th that will also feature a youth poetry workshop. You can join us from 3 to 5 p.m. at the Brisbane Library. And that's tonight's report.
Thank you very much, City Manager. And next item we have is under Mayor Council Matters. Consider a letter of support for Samtrans Route 141 and 142. Could we have a staff report, please?
Madam Mayor, we have no staff report. We do have the member of the public who wrote the written correspondence to council. He is in attendance.
Okay. Does he wish to speak, Ingrid?
Mr. Chong, would you like to participate and discuss with the council members your letter? He has a raised hand, so he will
Okay,
like the opportunity to speak.
all right. Mr. Tong, when you're ready, please go ahead. You can give us just some background. We've all seen your letter, your correspondence, and you were gracious enough to provide us with an update as well. Mr. Tong, you're muted.
Good evening. I'm Jeffrey Pong. I'm a candidate for City Council in San Bruno. Samtrans has never served San Bruno well and may not serve Brisbane either. They're not transparent. They do not like duplication or connected loops. The fact is that Samtrans does not support their claims do not support the facts. Right now, they have Route 141, which goes to Linden and Armour, and the southern terminal is to Shelter Creek. But Brisbane to Skyline College is not being served. They currently have Route 49, Brisbane to Terra Nova, but again, it does not touch Skyline College. My thoughts are that if there are students in Brisbane wishing to go to Skyline College, their new Route 141 can simply extend to Brisbane, and that's what I'm proposing. They lack some services in Rollingwood and Portola Highlands, but that can be made up with 142. So 141 and 142 needs to be coordinated together. But your support would be critical, especially when Samtrans does not serve the public and their decision-making process is not transparent. We do have Mayor Rico Medina on a Samtrans board of directors, but he has not championed anything historically or even presently. So your letter of support will be extremely important if we are to change Samtrans policy. I am looking at climate change in reducing the number of automobiles on the road in the Northern Peninsula. So that is my major incentive to motivate Samtrans to change. City Council resolutions or even a letter of support will be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight, and thank you for thinking of Brisbane for inclusion in your idea. It certainly was very thought-provoking. And I'd like to have each of our council members weigh in a bit because as I mentioned, they've been privy to your original letter and what's transpired since then. So let's start with Councilmember Cunningham.
I have no comments. I'm a little disturbed by a couple of the comments I just heard.
Okay. Councilmember Len.
Hi, Jeffrey. How you doing?
Hey, good evening.
Hey, thank you so much for your letter and for your years of public service, in micromobility. And yeah, good luck with your race. And thanks again for thinking about us.
Hey, thanks for your.
Okay. Councilmember O'Connell.
So when I originally got this letter about the possible routes, it looked like a really good idea to help with connectivity between Brisbane and San Bruno and up to Skyline College. And I did call it to the mayor's attention because I did think that it warranted support from Brisbane, because I think anything that helps with our transportation issues helps our community. So I would be in support of sending a letter of recommendation. We'll see what happens, and maybe we can get our Samtrans representative, Nancy Laxamana, to weigh in on this and see if it goes anywhere or has any method to go anywhere.
Okay, Councilmember Davis?
Well, I'm always an advocate for more public transportation to service Brisbane. We all know that we have to fight for what little we have. So if we could be on the receiving end of an additional few routes, I think that that helps our citizens. I was a student who went to Skyline, and I know that there are a lot of other students who attend Skyline that live in Brisbane. I think that to be able to, we're always talking about getting high school kids to school. And I think that there's a lot of our conversation is often lacking discussing college students. Not every college student can afford to have a car. So I think that this would serve those students. And I just, Jeffrey, thought that your comment at the end of your letter where you said, Samtrans big buses are too large to serve residential neighborhoods. They are best reserved for El Camino Real or a connector to San Francisco. Smaller shuttles equal better stops and faster turnaround will likely increase ridership exponentially. And I think that to me, that's so true. And that's really, I think, our lived experience here in Brisbane. Our streets are so tight that there's really minimal places where a bus can stop effectively. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we're so isolated in terms of service is because of our geography and our location within the county. But I'm in support of signing on to that letter.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tong, I also read through this, and knowing that the 141 and 142 connect, but not seamlessly, not easily, and you are most definitely stranded if you reach the 142 stop and there's nothing there for 30 minutes. So I'm very much in favor of this, and I hadn't thought about students who might want to attend Skyline College and giving them an opportunity to find an easier way to school that doesn't entail multiple route changes and an hour to an hour and a half of commuting seems like a fine idea to me. I don't see the harm in writing a letter. We've had somewhat of an uphill battle in the past year or so with Samtrans in terms of accommodating Brisbane. They have listened to us, but certainly we're not high on the list because of our size for Samtrans service. So I think that this is a reasonable ask, and whether or not they have at this time said we already set the routes the last time we looked at them, I think it's worthwhile to at least send a letter and weigh in on your idea. I think it has some merit, and whether they accept the entire idea or parts of it, I'd like to see them give it further consideration. So, Councilmember Lentz, I didn't hear from you one way or the other about sending a letter. Do you want to weigh in?
I'm totally in support. So please draft a letter, get it for our signature, and yeah, we'll get it out there.
Okay, and Councilmember Cunningham, also, would you be in favor of issuing a letter? I'm sorry, you're muted.
I would be in favor of issuing a letter, but I think we need to be very careful that we don't use accusations towards Samtrans for their lack of transparency. That did not sit well with me.
Okay. Well, the letter then, we can move ahead on that. And I will work with staff on drawing up a letter reflecting the ideas that Mr. Tong had submitted.
I think that's appropriate, Madam Mayor.
And Mr. Tong, thank you very much. I don't see him here, but thank you very much for attending tonight and talking to us. City Attorney, do we have to have a vote on that? An official vote?
No, Madam Mayor, you shouldn't have a vote. It wasn't agendized that way, but an informal letter by consensus is fine.
All right, thank you. We move on to countywide assignments and subcommittee report. Who would like to start? Councilmember Davis.
I think I only had ad hoc, which I don't think we are discussing. Let me just check one time to make sure.
Want me to come back to you?
No, I'm pulling it up right here.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything. I just have upcoming stuff.
Okay. Councilmember O'Connell.
So I had an airport land use committee meeting where City of San Bruno and City of Millbrae, I believe, had updates to their housing element that needed to come to the airport land use committee. And one of the distressing things is San Bruno is looking at declaring their entire Tanforan site as housing to meet their RENA numbers. It does not meet compatibility with the airport land use, and the airport was in extreme disagreement with it, and so we could not declare their housing element as consistent with the airport land use plan. And a lot of discussion was put into how could the state be forcing cities to declare spaces for housing that aren't good. And basically everyone on the committee agreed that their own cities are going through some of the same gymnastics to try to meet these housing numbers. I also had an airport land, a local policymakers group meeting, and that is with the Caltrain and electrification. There was no report from high-speed rail. And the biggest takeaway from that was that the the local policymaker group is working on getting a toolkit, a toolbox, so to speak, for at-grade crossings so that they can be safer when it comes to being electrified and getting alternative ways. Some of it may be closing some of the crossings for roadway crossings. Some could be doing overhead, and it really came to light that neither high-speed rail nor Caltrain electrification project is going to take ownership of the cost of these overcrossings. It's going to still be on the cities and finding other methods to pay for them. But it was interesting how they are supposedly working on a toolkit so that not each city is going to have to reinvent every overcrossing. And then I had an SFO airport roundtable portable noise monitor meeting. And that is where we talk about the portable noise monitors, permanent and temporary. And the airport is looking at maybe taking away one of Brisbane's permanent portables because they think they've gotten enough information from it to be able to use it on their new GBAS, well, use it in another location, possibly for their new arrivals heading over the southern cities for noise on their new guidance system. That was not, no decision was made on it because it was news to us. But we will be having discussions on that. I will work on hopefully not allowing them to take that other noise monitor from us. And that's the end of my meetings.
Sorry, I'm muted. May I ask you a question, Councilmember O'Connell? So,
Certainly.
when they talk about taking away one of Brisbane's noise monitors, and from what I understand, we're close to being back at pre-pandemic air traffic. Is that true?
Passenger traffic is back to 85% of pre-pandemic levels with less airplanes. So
Okay.
their air traffic is still lower than it had been in the pre-pandemic. They're just packing more people and more stuff on every plane.
Okay.
So the planes are louder and heavier a little bit, but there's a few less of them, but not by very much.
Okay. And so pre-pandemic, there were plans that SFO had that was, I don't recall the numbers, maybe you do. I thought it was almost going to double the air traffic over 10 years. Have they brought that up? Because assuming going forward, the levels pre-pandemic keep increasing, and if they go back to their original plans to add additional flight, won't we need that noise monitor?
Possibly. Growth at the airport is not something that this group can look at because the amount of routes and flights are only subject to federal, not to this organization. So it becomes convoluted. As long as the airport says they have space to receive the airline, they have to. They can't force them to specific hours. They can't force them to other things. But that wasn't a discussion that happened in either of these subcommittees.
Okay, thank you. All right, Councilmember Lentz, how about you go next?
I don't think I was on any subcommittee meetings, and definitely no county ones.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Cunningham. I know you and I had many meetings.
We had many meetings, but the only ones that I've got on this list to report out on are planning issue subcommittee meetings relative to our reach codes. And I think we were in agreement with staff to move forward on everything that was on the plate.
Yeah, I would just add that we had a lot of suggestions from Open Space and Ecology Committee. Those were really appreciated. We were also shown reach codes enacted by other peninsula cities, and also a lot of work done by our sustainability coordinator, Adrian Etherton. So we had a wonderful presentation, and we gave them some feedback, them being staff, and I believe they're going to bring something back to the council for further discussion. Anything to add to that?
Nope, I don't think so.
And
Looking
then-
forward to seeing what Adrian has, what she brings back.
And then you and I also on October 31st had ordinance 528 ad hoc. I think that's an ad hoc we can report on. You want me to start on that, or do you want to
Go
start?
ahead.
Okay, that was to discuss our Brisbane ordinance regarding testing and research using live animals. And we discussed possible revisions to the ordinance. Also noted, I brought up that there was a recent passage in the US Senate of what's called the FDA Modernization Act. It's legislation authored by Cory Booker and Rand Paul. So it was bipartisan. And this legislation that passed the Senate would end the FDA mandate that requires experimental drugs be tested on animals before they can be used on humans in clinical trials. So that shows a definite change of direction on the part of the US government. That's going to have a ripple effect with all pharmaceutical companies. I don't know if that's gone through the House of Representatives yet. So I will do some research to see if I can find out. But Councilmember Cunningham, you brought up quite a bit about also trends worldwide and also within the United States using alternative methods of
Yeah, this
testing
is
without live
this is
animals.
yeah, this has been something I've been studying for many years, and the success rate for the testing with computer modeling has been consistently higher for about 10 to 15 years. I think a lot of the big companies have been, stuck between a rock and a hard place because they know these statistics are correct. They know what comes out of MIT, what comes out of Harvard, what comes out of all of these top institutions around the world are correct. But they were hamstrung because of the FDA making the requirement that a drug could not go to market without first testing on XYZ animals. So I think on supporting the biotech companies and the pharmaceutical companies that have been trying to move in the right direction, I would hazard a guess, make an assumption that they are probably pretty excited about the news that this is moving forward, that they can be using computer modeling, which is consistently proven to be more effective than testing on animals. So it's kind of an exciting time for a lot of these forward-thinking things. That was great news to hear. Hopefully it moves forward sooner rather than later. And I'm sure the pharmaceutical companies and people like Bristol Myers, et cetera, are going to be super happy about this decision. Be my guess.
Did you have any other meetings to report out?
No.
Okay, so I had a Peninsula Clean Energy meeting on October 27th. And the PCE board, as it's been doing, we approved 3 new contracts. I'll just give you a brief rundown. The first one, the standalone energy storage project, which energy storage is paramount, very hard to come by. This is with Nova Power in Riverside County, 15 years, operation date of August 2024. The second contract was with Whitegrass number 2 for geothermal power for 20 years. Geothermal is really in short supply, and it's a wonderful source because it's 24/7. This is coming from Lyon County, Nevada, which is 10 miles north of Yerington, if you know Nevada. Operation should be on or about December 2024. And the third contract was with Snow Mountain Hydro, a small hydro project located near the town of Bernie, California, in eastern Shasta County. That has an operation date of January 2024. So all 3 of these contracts, they are fairly small, but they're really very important. We're signing a lot of those because it's hard to get contracts and we need that 24/7 power. And they just add up. They add up into having that sustainable power source. And finally, I just mentioned the important announcement last month is that PCE is making available interest-free financing and new rebates. And those are for installing electric appliances and other energy efficiency upgrades on your home. So you can certainly go to the PCE website to learn more. And I think all of our city social media have reflected information about these programs as well.
Well, they've got a $10,000 interest-free loan that they will put onto your account if you go ahead with a heat pump or other things like that. That's a lot of money, interest-free, and then you just pay it off when you can. So that was really good news. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Paying off every month. It's the way to go.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. City Council meeting schedule is next. Our next meetings, it's a closed session on November 9th, 2022 at 6 p.m. And then on November 17, 2022 7:32. We have a closed session at 6 p.m. A special meeting and workshop on reorganization at 7 p.m. and regular business at 7:30 p.m. And moving to written communication, City Clerk, did we receive written communication?
Madam Mayor, we received written correspondence from Jeffrey Tong, Alexis Salandanen from the San Mateo County Transit District, and Dana Dilworth.
Okay, thank you. And we move to oral communications number 2. Any members of the public wishing to make public comment?
Madam Mayor, I see no raised hands at this time.
Okay, that being said, thank you everyone, guests, council members, staff for your attendance. This meeting is now adjourned at 9:52 p.m.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.